The rain had only just stopped when Armin stepped out of the supermarket, balancing a small bag of groceries in one hand and his car keys in the other. The parking lot glistened under the faint evening lights, and for a moment, everything felt calm, ordinary, predictable. But then he heard it, so soft he almost thought he imagined it. A tiny whimper, sharp enough to pull him to a stop. He turned, scanning the empty rows of carts and the quiet loading area behind the store. Another sound followed, a weak cry, like someone called for help but too tired to try again. Armin walked toward the noise, his steps slow, careful. He wasn't the kind of person who usually jumped into strange situations, but something about that tiny cry tugged at him in a way he couldn't ignore. As he got closer to the side of the building, where the shadows were thicker and people rarely passed, he noticed a cardboard box tucked against the wall. It was small, soggy from the rain, and dented on one side, like it had been kicked or dropped in a hurry. The crying came from inside it. He crouched down, pushing the flap open with one cautious hand, unsure of what he might find. And then he froze. A tiny puppy, no bigger than the length of his forearm, lay curled inside. Its fur was damp, its body shivering, and when it lifted its head to look at him, its eyes were so round and scared that Armin felt something inside him shift. The puppy whimpered again, a sound full of confusion and fear, and tried to drag itself forward. That's when Armin noticed a small ribbon around its neck, a faded pink bow tied in a sloppy knot, as though placed there by a child, or someone who didn't know what they were doing. For a few seconds, Armin didn't move. He just stared at the abandoned puppy, stunned by how fragile it looked. The supermarket behind him was still buzzing with people. Cars came and went, yet somehow no one else had seen this tiny life left alone in the cold. He could only imagine how long the puppy had been out here, waiting, hoping someone would notice. And for some reason he didn't fully understand, he felt like it had been waiting specifically for him. The puppy tried again to stand, its legs wobbling, its body tilting sideways. Armin reached out before he even realized it, sliding a hand under the small creature to keep it steady. Its fur was colder than he expected. Too cold. "Who left you here?" he whispered without meaning to. The puppy didn't answer, of course, but it pressed its head against his palm as if relieved he had finally come. Armin looked around the parking lot one more time, hoping to see someone searching, calling, or even pretending to care. But the space was empty. Just a few cars, a flutter of old receipts blowing across the pavement, and a box that clearly didn't belong here. He knew he should take the puppy inside the supermarket and report it. That was the responsible thing to do. Maybe someone had lost it. Maybe the owner was already talking to the customer service desk. But another thought nagged at him. Something about the ribbon, the soggy box, the way the puppy trembled. This didn't feel like a case of someone losing their pet. It felt like someone had left it here on purpose. Armin stood up slowly, holding the puppy against his chest. The little animal curled into him instantly, like it had been waiting for warmth for far too long. Thunder rumbled in the distance again, low and warning, and Armin didn't have the heart to put it back into that box. He walked toward his car, trying to decide what to do next, but with every step the decision seemed to make itself. The puppy needed safety. It needed help, and right now, Armin was the only person around willing to give it that. When he settled into the driver's seat, he placed the puppy carefully on a folded towel he kept for emergencies. It looked up at him with those wide, hopeful eyes, and he felt a strange sense of responsibility wash over him. He wasn't planning to become a hero. He wasn't looking for a story. He just knew he couldn't walk away from something so helpless. As he started the engine, though, something unexpected happened. The puppy let out a small cough, then another, and Armin noticed a faint tag stuck to the ribbon. Something he hadn't seen in the dim lighting before. It wasn't a normal pet tag. It was a small piece of paper, folded many times, and taped clumsily to the ribbon. His heartbeat quickened as he reached out and carefully removed it. The paper was wet, but still readable, and the moment he unfolded it, his stomach tightened. There were only 6 words written on it. 6 words that instantly changed everything he thought he understood about this abandoned puppy at the supermarket. 6 words that made his hands tremble and his mind race. 6 words that hinted this wasn't just an accident. This wasn't just someone giving up a pet. This was something deeper, something far more human, something that would touch hearts in ways he never expected. Armin read the message again, unable to believe what he was seeing. The puppy looked at him, waiting, trusting, completely unaware of the truth tied to its tiny neck. And as the rain began to fall again in slow, steady drops, Armin knew one thing for sure. Whatever those words meant, whatever story they belonged to, whatever truth was hidden behind this tiny life, he was already part of it. He took a slow breath, looked at the trembling puppy beside him, and whispered, "I don't know what happened to you, but we're going to find out." What Armin didn't know yet was that the truth behind this abandoned puppy would not only surprise him, it would melt hearts, spark hope, and change much more than just his evening. And the moment he turned the key and began driving away from the supermarket, the real story began. Armin kept glancing at the note as he drove, the words replaying in his mind like a whisper he couldn't silence. The puppy rested quietly beside him, its breast shallow but steady, its tiny chest rising and falling against the towel. The soft hum of the car engine didn't comfort him the way it normally did. Instead, every sound in the car felt heavier, as if the air itself carried the weight of a story he wasn't ready for. He turned toward home, though he wasn't sure why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was fear of what he'd find if he went back to the supermarket to ask questions. Or maybe it was simply because the puppy needed warm fast, and driving around aimlessly wouldn't help. The sky had gone darker, the clouds thickening, and the rain tapping lightly at the windshield made everything feel even more urgent. He stopped at a red light, glanced again at the small piece of paper, and felt another chill run up his spine. The handwriting was uneven, rushed, like the person writing it was shaking or running out of time. And even though the message was short, it felt packed with emotion. Fear, guilt, maybe even desperation. He read it again, whispering it under his breath as if trying to understand what the person must have been feeling. He didn't speak the words out loud completely. The story would reveal them later. But just thinking about them made the mystery deepen. Who wrote it? Why leave the puppy in a supermarket parking lot? Why not ask for help directly? The light turned green, and Armin drove forward, his mind spinning. The puppy shifted slightly and let out a soft sigh, like it finally trusted that the worst was over. But Armin knew the worst might just be beginning. By the time he pulled into his apartment complex, the rain had grown heavier. He parked, grabbed his jacket, and carefully scooped the puppy into his arms. It didn't protest. It simply clung to him, pressing its damp fur against his chest, as if afraid he might disappear too. Inside, his apartment was quiet, warm, and clean. Nothing dramatic, nothing special. Just a simple place where he lived alone. He set the puppy down gently on a blanket and turned on a small heater nearby. The room filled with soft, warm air, and the puppy seemed relieved, stretching its tiny legs before curling into a small ball. Armin sat cross-legged on the floor, beside it, staring at the note again. He tried to piece things together logically. Maybe the puppy belonged to someone who couldn't keep it anymore. Maybe the note explained why. Maybe it wasn't a mystery at all. Maybe it was just a sad situation. But something about the way the box had been hidden behind the supermarket didn't feel like a simple case of someone giving up a pet. The pink ribbon bothered him too. It wasn't dirty or torn. It was neatly tied, even though the knot was clumsy. Whoever put it there cared enough to dress the puppy up, even though they left it in a cold box. That contradiction kept looping through his head. He checked the puppy's paws. They were a little scratched, as if it had tried to climb out of the box. Its belly was warm now, but still trembling slightly. He reached for a small bowl of water and placed it nearby. The puppy sniffed it, then took a few slow sips. Armin exhaled, trying to calm his nerves. He had always been the kind of person who tried to mind his own business, who never imagined he'd get tangled in someone else's problems. But now, sitting here with his tiny life relying on him, it didn't feel like he had a choice. He looked at the note again. This time, the paper felt heavier, as if the message wanted to be heard. It pulled at him, urging him to take the next step, to look deeper. He didn't know whether to feel scared or determined. His phone buzzed suddenly, startling him. He picked it up, expecting a message from work or a friend, but it was nothing important. Still, that small interruption made him realize how far his evening had veered from normal. Just an hour ago, He was buying groceries, thinking about dinner. Now, he had a shivering puppy on his living room floor and a note that had frozen his heart. He leaned back against the couch, running a hand through his hair. The puppy raised its head and squeaked softly, as if sensing his unease. Armin reached out and stroked its back, and the puppy relaxed again. "Okay," he whispered. "We'll figure this out, one step at a time." He thought about going to the vet, but it was late, and most clinics would be closed. He could call an emergency number, but something in his gut told him he needed to understand more before involving anyone else. He didn't know what the note would mean to other people, and he didn't want the puppy taken away before he uncovered the truth. Hours passed slowly. The rain kept tapping at the windows, steady and rhythmic. The puppy eventually fell asleep, curled tightly like it was guarding something close to its heart. Armin watched it, feeling a strange mixture of protectiveness and worry. He tried to distract himself, turning on the TV, flipping through channels, but nothing held his attention. Everything felt muted, distant, like his mind was unable to focus on anything except the note's 6 words. They replayed again and again, creating new questions each time. Was the person who wrote the note in danger? Were they trying to protect the puppy from something or someone? Why did the message sound like a warning? The air in the room felt heavier with every passing minute, and Armin found himself standing up, pacing slowly back and forth, thinking of possibilities he didn't want to consider. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was responsibility. The puppy hadn't chosen him. But now that it was here, now that he had read those words, he couldn't ignore the feeling that fate had pushed them together. He stepped toward the window and looked out at the rain-soaked street. Everything seemed peaceful, completely unaware that a mystery had followed him home. He wondered where the writer of the note was now. Safe? Scared? Watching? That last thought made him close the curtains quickly. He turned back toward the puppy, watching its small body rise and fall with each breath. So innocent, so unaware of the story it carried. Armin felt a lump form in his throat. He didn't know what the truth was yet, but he knew it was big enough to change everything. He sat beside the puppy again, gently adjusting the blanket around it. As he did, his fingers brushed against a ribbon, the same ribbon tied by someone who would care enough to give the puppy a small symbol of love, even if they couldn't keep it. Armin stared at that ribbon for a long time. He didn't notice the puppy stir in its sleep, or the rain growing heavier outside. He didn't notice the time passing, or the lights flickering slightly as the storm worsened. All he could think about was how a single moment in a supermarket parking lot had pulled him into a story he didn't ask for, but now couldn't walk away from. And deep down, he knew the note was only the beginning. Whatever truth waited ahead, it wasn't going to be simple. It wasn't going to be safe. And it definitely wasn't going to let him go easily. But for now, all he could do was wait for morning, because the storm outside wasn't nearly as intense as the one building inside his mind. And when dawn came, the clues hidden behind the abandoned puppy would begin to reveal themselves piece by piece. Armin barely slept that night. Every time he drifted off, he'd jolt awake again, hearing the puppy shift or whimper softly. Each sound made his heart jump, as if the tiny creature carried a secret that could unravel at any moment. By early morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the world outside washed clean but strangely quiet. The puppy was curled against his chest on the couch, warm now, breathing peacefully. He stared at the ceiling for a long time before gently lifting the puppy and settling it into the blanket. The note was still on the table, and just looking at it made his stomach tighten again. Those 6 words had kept him awake all night, running through his mind like a warning he couldn't ignore. He reached for his phone. Maybe he should call someone, an animal shelter, a vet, a friend. But each time he imagined explaining the note, something held him back. He didn't want the wrong person to dismiss it as nothing, and he didn't want the right person to take the puppy away before he understood the full truth. As he stood in the quiet apartment, he realized he needed more information. He couldn't solve anything sitting here doing nothing. Someone at the supermarket might have seen something. Maybe a security camera caught whoever left the box. At the very least, he could retrace his steps. He grabbed his jacket and keys, then hesitated, looking at the puppy. Leaving it alone didn't feel right. Not after everything. Not with that note. He lifted the puppy gently. It blinked at him sleepily but didn't protest. He tucked it inside his jacket where it stayed warm and close to his chest, and the little creature nuzzled into him, trusting him completely. That trust added another weight he could feel with every breath. The supermarket parking lot looked different in the daylight, less mysterious, less intimidating. Just an ordinary space where people loaded groceries and hurried off to work. But to Armin, it felt like a crime scene, calm on the surface, hiding something beneath. He walked slowly to the side of the building where he'd found the soggy box. It was gone now, probably thrown away by staff or blown away by the storm. Only faint dampness on the pavement remained, along with small pieces of cardboard sticking to the ground. The puppy stirred inside his jacket, as if sensing the place. Armin scanned the area again and again, tried to imagine someone walking here with the puppy, placing it down, walking away. What were they feeling? Fear? Sadness? Panic? Why here? A familiar voice pulled him from his thoughts. Back again? That was quick. It was a security guard from last night, the one patrolling near the entrance. Armin managed a small smile, tightening his hold on the puppy so it wouldn't peek out. Yeah, he said casually. I, left something here last night. Thought I'd check. The guard nodded, uninterested at first, but then he squinted slightly. You looked worried yesterday, too. Everything okay? Armin hesitated. How much should he say? He didn't want to reveal the note just yet. Just looking for some clues, he said lightly, hoping it didn't sound strange. The guard raised an eyebrow. Clues. Armin forced a laugh. Long story. Probably nothing. But the guard's expression shifted. Whatever casual mood, he had vanished. You mean that box behind the building? He asked quietly. Armin's heart jumped. You saw it? Saw it this morning. Someone must have tossed it out. Why? Did it matter? Armin felt the puppy press against him, as if sensing the tension. He swallowed and nodded slowly. I found something in it. The guard's eyes locked onto him. Serious now. Curious. Like what? Armin didn't want to lie, but he wasn't ready to tell the whole truth either. A puppy, he said softly. The guard's face softened instantly. Ah, poor thing. I didn't know. Wish I'd seen it last night. Did you see anyone around the area? Armin asked quickly. Anyone acting strange? Maybe leaving in a hurry? The guard rubbed his chin. Could have been someone during a rush hour, but I didn't notice anything unusual. Cameras might have caught something, though. Armin's pulse quickened. You have security footage? Not me, the guard said. But the manager does. The guard walked a few steps, then paused and lowered his voice. You know, usually when people abandon animals, they do it far from cameras. The spot you found the box? No camera angle covers that corner. Armin almost dropped a note from mental shock. So they chose that area on purpose? Probably. Someone didn't want to be seen. That single sentence deepened the mystery even more. Someone took careful steps to avoid being noticed. Someone who knew where cameras were placed. Someone intentional. The guard shrugged and walked off, leaving Armin frozen in place. Someone planned this. Someone left the puppy in the one spot where they wouldn't get caught on video. But why leave a note if they wanted to stay hidden? He walked back to his car with the puppy still tucked inside his jacket. Every step felt heavier. What started as a simple act of kindness was turning into something far more complicated. And even though he didn't know if he was ready for the truth, he already felt responsible for uncovering it. At home, he sat down again with the puppy. The little creature looked up at him with wide eyes, innocent and trusting. He gently untied the pink ribbon, examining the knot again. It was clumsy, uneven, as if tied by small fingers or by someone in a hurry. He studied the puppy closely now that it was warm and awake. Its fur was soft, its ears slightly oversized for its small face. It looked clean, not like a stray. Someone had loved it. Someone had cared for it before whatever happened caused them to leave behind. That thought became a new weight pressing against his chest. Maybe the person who abandoned the puppy didn't want to. Maybe they had no other choice. He reached for the note again. The puppy shifted nervously, as if sensing the strange tension associated with that crumpled paper. Armin smoothed the edges carefully, staring at those shaky letters, trying to imagine the moment they were written. Hands trembling, heart racing, fear or heartbreak clouding every breath. The more he thought about it, the less the mystery felt like someone simply giving up a pet. It felt like something painful, something forced. And then another unsettling thought crept into his mind. What if the person who wrote the note wasn't just trying to protect the puppy, but trying to protect him too? He felt the room go cold for a moment. The puppy rested its head on his leg, trusting him completely. And that trust made the growing tension even stronger. There were too many unanswered questions now, too many threads pulling him deeper into something he didn't understand. Who left the puppy? Why avoid the cameras? Why write those 6 words? Why choose him? And most of all, what danger or secret was hidden behind this small, trembling life? Armin didn't have any answers yet. But one thing was clear. Whatever story he had stepped into, it wasn't just about an abandoned puppy anymore. It was about the person behind the note. It was about the truth they were too afraid to say out loud. And as Armin looked down at the puppy sleeping peacefully beside him, he felt the tension tighten even further, because he knew the calm wouldn't last. The story behind this mystery wasn't over. It was only getting started. Armin woke up the next morning with a heaviness he couldn't shake, like the mystery had settled into the walls of his apartment. The puppy was already awake, sitting near the blanket and looking at him with those big, curious eyes. It wagged its tiny tail when he sat up, and for a moment, that small gesture softened everything. But the note on the table pulled him right back into the tension of what he still didn't understand. He picked up the paper again, rereading the 6 shaky words. They hit him harder now than they had the night before. Something about them felt urgent, like a message written by someone who didn't have time to explain anything else. And the more he stared at them, the more he felt the weight of something he wasn't sure he wanted to uncover. He knew he needed answers, and there was only one place that could help him move forward: the supermarket security office. The guard had mentioned the manager. Maybe if Armin phrased it carefully, he could convince them to let him see the footage. Not to expose anyone, but just to understand. He tucked the puppy gently into a soft sling made from an old sweater, so it could stay close and warm, without being noticed. As he drove back to the supermarket, he felt the tension building with every mile. Whoever left the puppy hadn't wanted to be seen. That meant Armin might be stepping into something bigger than he had realized. The manager's office was small and cluttered, filled with stacks of papers and a small monitor displaying several camera angles. The manager, a woman in her late 40s with tired eyes, studied him carefully as he explained, using only the safe parts of the story. "I found something behind the building last night," Armin said softly. "A puppy. I think someone abandoned it, and I want to know if anyone acted suspicious." The manager sighed, rubbing her temples. "People have done worse, unfortunately. But why come back today?" Armin hesitated, choosing his words carefully, because the way it was left, it didn't feel normal. The manager looked at him for a long moment before leaning back and crossing her arms. "I can't show private footage without a real reason, but I can check it myself." Relief and dread tangled together inside him. "Please." She pulled up last night's recordings. The footage played through a mix of people walking, cars arriving, carts being returned, ordinary moments. But when the timeline reached the hour Armin found the box, the manager slowed down. The camera angle didn't show the hidden corner behind the building, but it captured the general area around it. Armin leaned forward, eyes glued to the screen. For minutes, nothing happened. Then the manager paused. "There," she said. A figure appeared at the far edge of the screen. Hooded, moving quickly, not running, but walking with purpose. They were small, possibly a teenager, possibly a woman. It was hard to tell. The person kept glancing around, checking the area repeatedly. The figure moved toward the blind spot where the cameras couldn't see. Then they disappeared behind the building. Armin held his breath. A full minute passed. Then the figure came back into view, walking lighter, almost shakily now. They paused for a moment, staring back at the hidden corner, as if torn between leaving and returning. Then they hurried away, disappearing off-screen. The manager frowned. Strange. They could have dropped anything there. Armin swallowed hard, unable to look away. They looked scared. "That's what worries me," she muttered quietly. He didn't want to push further, but he had to ask. Could you tell where they came from or where they went? The manager reviewed a few more minutes of footage, but shook her head. "This angle doesn't catch their face. Sorry, I wish I could help more." Armin thanked her and left, forcing himself to stay composed even though his mind raced with questions. The puppy inside his sweater shifted, letting out a small sound, and Armin instinctively placed a hand over it. Whoever that hooded figure was, they hadn't abandoned the puppy casually. They had been nervous, afraid, and the note, the 6 words, took on an even more painful meaning. As he walked back to his car, he noticed movement near the edge of the lot. A young girl, maybe 12 or 13, was standing alone, staring at him. Her clothes were slightly worn, her backpack old, and she clutched something tightly against her chest. The moment she noticed him looking, she quickly turned and walked away. Too fast, almost like she didn't want him to recognize her. A ripple of unease spread through Armin. Was she connected somehow? Or was he just imagining things now that the mystery was consuming him? He wanted to call out to her, to ask if she needed help. But something stopped him. The tension around him felt fragile, like one wrong move would cause the truth to slip further away. He waited until she disappeared around the corner, then headed to his car. As he sat down behind the wheel, he took a slow breath and pulled the puppy out of the sling. It blinked at him with trust, completely unaware of the growing shadows around its past. Armin ran a finger across its tiny head. "Someone out there loves you," he whispered, "or loved you enough to try to protect you. But protect from what?" That question followed him home like a weight on his chest. As the day went on, small clues continued to surface. Clues he didn't fully understand but couldn't ignore. A knock on his door that came at the wrong moment, but revealed no one when he checked. A message notification on his phone from an unknown number that disappeared before he opened it. A quiet feeling of being watched when he stepped outside with the puppy. The world around him hadn't changed, but it felt like something hidden in the shadows had awakened. As night fell, the tension inside the apartment grew thicker. The puppy seemed restless, whimpering softly as if sensing something in the air. Armin held it close, trying to calm it down, but the unease wouldn't fade. He sat near the window, lights off, staring at the dark street outside. Every sound, car passing, door closing, footsteps in the hallway, made his heart thump harder. This wasn't just a lost puppy anymore. Something else was connected to the note, to the girl, to the hooded figure, and now to him. The climax of everything waiting to unfold felt close, too close, like the truth was circling him, inching nearer, preparing to surface whether he was ready for it or not. He held the puppy tightly, whispering softly, "Whatever this is, whatever happened to you, we're going to face it." But deep inside, he felt something he hadn't felt since the moment he opened that soggy box. Fear. Because now the story wasn't just about finding answers. It was about discovering what danger had been left behind along with this tiny life, and why it was now coming straight toward him. Armin kept the apartment dark, hoping the quiet would help him think, but instead it made every sound feel sharper, more intrusive. The puppy lay curled against his chest, finally calm, though its tiny ears still twitched at sudden noises outside. Armin didn't know if he was imagining the tension, or if something truly was shifting in the air around him. He stared out the window again. The street was mostly empty, only a few dim streetlights flickering softly across the pavement. Nothing alarming at first glance. But something inside him kept insisting he was missing a piece of the puzzle. Something important. The hooded figure. The girl watching him. The shaky note. The way someone had chosen the blind spot behind the supermarket. It all felt connected in a way he couldn't yet grasp. He stood up slowly, careful not to startle the puppy, and moved to the kitchen to pour himself a glass of water. His hands were shaking more than he expected. He couldn't deny it anymore. Fear was settling into him, tightening around his ribs. Just as he brought the glass to his lips, a soft thud echoed from the hallway outside his apartment door. A single thud, not loud, not aggressive, but enough to freeze him in place. The puppy's tiny head shot up immediately, its body going tense in his arms. Armin's breath caught, and he instinctively stepped back into the shadows. Another sound followed, this time softer, like a slow scrape against the wall. His pulse hammered. He waited, barely breathing, listening. Then silence. Complete silence. He stayed still for almost a full minute before carefully inching toward the door. He didn't open it, just leaned close enough to listen. The hallway was quiet now. Too quiet. Eventually, when he convinced himself it was probably nothing, he walked back to the living room, though the unease didn't fade. He sat on the couch again, trying to calm the puppy, and that was when he heard the faint buzz of his phone vibrating. Not a notification sound this time, just a vibrating buzz, like someone was calling but the phone was on silent mode. Except he hadn't put it on silent. His heart jumped as he picked it up. The caller ID said unknown, the same unknown number that had sent a message earlier and then vanished. He hesitated, then answered. He didn't speak first. He waited. For a few seconds, there was nothing, only soft static. Then a voice broke through, a whisper, trembling, nervous, young. Please don't tell anyone you have the puppy. Armin felt a shock run straight down his spine. His throat tightened. Who is this? He asked quietly. The caller didn't answer that. Instead, the voice cracked slightly, like the person was scared or hiding somewhere. You weren't supposed to take it home. You weren't supposed to get involved. Armin gripped the phone tighter. He tried to keep his voice steady. What's going on? Did you leave the puppy there? A shaky breath came through the line. They're looking for it. Armin felt his stomach drop. Ooh. More breathing. A soft sniffle. The voice sounded like it belonged to someone no older than the girl he had seen earlier. You don't understand, the whisper said. If they find out you have it, they'll come for you too. Armin's entire body went cold. The puppy nudged his arm, sensing his fear. He stepped toward the window, scanning the street below, even though he didn't know what he was looking for. Why? Why would anyone come after a puppy? There was another pause, longer this time. When the voice finally returned, it was softer, heavier, as if the person was struggling to speak. Because it wasn't supposed to survive. Armin froze. What do you mean? But the caller didn't explain. Instead, the girl's voice lowered even further. They're watching the supermarket, and they know someone took the box. Someone who wasn't supposed to. Armin felt the world closing in around him. How do you know this? Were you? The voice shook again. I can't tell you. If they hear me. Suddenly the call cut off. Silence. No explanation. No chance to ask more. No way to call back. Armin stood there gripping the phone, heart pounding so hard he felt it in his throat. The puppy pressed close to him, trembling again. He walked slowly to the door, unlocking it with trembling fingers. He opened it just a crack to check the hallway. And that's when he saw it. A small folded piece of paper, lying directly in front of his apartment door. His breath caught. He knelt down, staring at it before picking it up. His hands were shaking as he unfolded it. The handwriting was the same, uneven, shaky. But this note didn't have 6 words. It had only 3. You've been seen. Armin's entire body went rigid. The hallway was empty, silent. But someone had been here. Someone close enough to leave a warning at his door, without making a sound. He shut the door quickly, locking it twice. Every instinct screamed that the danger around him was closing in. Someone knew he had the puppy. Someone had followed him home. Someone was watching him. Maybe even the moment he stepped out earlier with the puppy wrapped in his jacket. The unanswered questions twisted tighter inside him. What wasn't supposed to survive? Who were they? Why hide the puppy in a blind spot? Why warn him? And who exactly had seen him? The tension in the room grew thicker, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The puppy whimpered softly, curling against his leg, and Armin pulled it into his arms, feeling its tiny heartbeat racing against his chest. He didn't know who the girl was. He didn't know who the hooded figure was. But one thing was suddenly terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just about a secret. This was about someone who desperately wanted the truth buried. And now Armin wasn't just a stranger who happened to find a puppy. He had become a witness, a threat, a target. Whatever was coming next, whatever secret the puppy carried, It was big enough, dangerous enough, that someone had already come looking. And the real twist, the real truth behind the abandoned puppy, was closer than ever, close enough to knock on his door. A deep quiet fell over the room as Daniel stood frozen, the small puppy curled in his arms, trembling softly. The glow from the man's phone screen cast a pale light across the tiny creature's fur as the last few words of the message finished loading. He read them again, slower this time, as if repeating them would somehow make them less shocking. But they stayed the same, clear and unsettling. If you found him, please keep him safe. They're still looking for him. His breath caught. For weeks, he had assumed the abandoned puppy he found outside the supermarket was just another heartbreaking case of someone leaving an unwanted animal behind. But this message, sent from the same temporary number that had contacted him days earlier, changed everything. And now, with the puppy pressed against his chest, Daniel felt the weight of a truth he hadn't even uncovered yet pressing firmly against his thoughts. The puppy's soft whine pulled him back. Daniel stroked the little head gently, trying to calm both the animal and himself. It felt strange how connected he had grown to this small creature in such a short time. The abandoned puppy had already brought pieces of mystery, fear, and hope into his life, more than he had ever expected. And now another layer had been added, one that suddenly made the shadows outside his window feel unfamiliar. He sank onto the couch, holding the puppy close. The message had come right after he'd called the number again, hoping someone might finally answer. He didn't think he'd receive a reply because the line never rang. But now this text was here, showing someone had been watching or waiting. He looked at the puppy again. Those bright little eyes seemed to reflect more emotion than before, as if the tiny dog understood something deeper was unfolding. Daniel had always believed animals could sense things humans missed, and right now he could swear this puppy knew that something big was coming. He opened the message app, fingers hesitating above the keyboard. Should he respond? Should he ask who they were? Or should he stay silent and pretend he never saw any of it? His heart raced at the thought of getting involved in something he didn't fully understand. The abandoned puppy mystery already pushed him out of his comfort zone, but this felt like stepping into a whole different story. Before he could type anything, a soft tapping echoed against a window. The sound was faint, almost too gentle to notice. Daniel stiffened. His eyes shifted to glass. The night outside was dark, the yard barely visible under the weak porch light. Another tap came, this time slightly louder. The puppy lifted its head quickly, ears perked. Daniel swallowed hard, slowly standing and moving toward the window. His footsteps were cautious, barely making a sound on the floor. When he reached the curtain, he paused. Something told him not to whip it open. Instead, he pulled the fabric just enough to peek outside. Nothing, just an empty yard, the quiet fence, the branches of the old trees swaying slightly. No figure, no movement, only the faint breeze brushing past the house. He let the curtain fall back into place, but his heartbeat didn't slow. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous yet, but wrong. Like someone had been there just seconds before he looked. He turned back toward the room, trying to steady himself. The puppy watched him from the couch, big eyes glowing with trust and concern. Daniel forced a smile. "It's okay," he whispered, though he didn't fully believe it. He picked up the phone again, finally typing. "Who are you? Why is someone looking for him?" He hit send. The message delivered instantly, but no reply came. Silence settled around the room once more. The puppy curled against his leg, warm and small, as Daniel sat back down and tried to make sense of the puzzle growing around him. He couldn't shake the feeling that this abandoned puppy was not abandoned at all, that someone had left him at the supermarket for a reason, that someone had been following Daniel's social media posts about rescuing him, that someone knew exactly where this tiny dog had ended up. Minutes passed. No reply. He started to think maybe the sender wouldn't answer at all. Maybe the warning was all they intended to give. Then his phone buzzed sharply in his hand. A new message. His pulse jumped as he opened it. The text was short, just 6 words, but it carried more weight than anything he had read so far. Check under the puppy's collar. Daniel froze. Something cold crept slowly down his spine. He hadn't even thought to check the collar. The puppy wore a simple, worn-out red collar with no tag. The kind of collar someone might put on in a rush, without thinking, or the kind someone might use to hide something small. He lifted the puppy gently and ran his fingers under the collar. At first, he felt nothing. Then a tiny bump, something tucked deep inside the seam. The puppy squirmed a little but didn't resist as Daniel carefully pulled at the edge of the collar. A small tab loosened, revealing a hidden stitch. And inside it, so small he almost didn't see it, was a thin piece of folded paper. His heart pounded louder with every second. He unfolded it slowly. The paper was old, creased, and slightly torn. But the writing on it was clear, written in small, hurried letters. He read the first line, then the second, then the third. By the time he reached the last few words, his breath had left him entirely. Suddenly everything, the abandoned puppy, the mysterious messages, the late-night tapping, felt connected in a way he had never imagined. A truth he wasn't ready for was staring back at him, written on that tiny scrap of paper. He looked at the puppy again, his voice barely a whisper. Oh no, this changes everything. And before he could think, before he could move, before he could decide what to do next, someone knocked on his front door. A slow, heavy, deliberate knock, right on cue, as if they had been waiting for him to read that note. Daniel tightened his hold on the puppy, fear and curiosity crashing through him at the same time. He took a single step toward the door, and that's where everything changed. Daniel stood frozen, the note trembling in his hand, and the puppy pressed tightly against his chest as the knock echoed through the small house again. This time it was softer, more patient, almost as if whoever stood outside already knew he was there and wasn't in any hurry to leave. For a long moment, he didn't move at all. He listened to his heartbeat pounding in his ears and the faint sound of the puppy breathing fast, confused by the tension filling the room. Everything he had discovered in the past hours flashed through his mind, and he knew he couldn't run from the truth anymore. He finally took a slow breath and walked toward the door. When he reached it, he didn't open it right away. He just stood there, the wood acting like a thin barrier between his quiet life and whatever story he had unknowingly stepped into. "It's okay," he whispered to the puppy, though he wasn't sure if he meant it. Then he opened the door. A woman stood on the porch. She looked exhausted and anxious, her clothes slightly wrinkled and her eyes red, as if she hadn't slept in days. But the moment she saw the puppy in his arms, her face shifted. Relief washed over her so strongly that she covered her mouth with both hands and took a shaky breath. "You found him," she said softly, her voice breaking. "Thank God you found him." Daniel didn't know what to say. He simply nodded and held the puppy a little tighter, waiting, needing an explanation before handing anything over. The woman noticed and gently lifted her hands to show she meant no harm. "My name is Elena," she said slowly. I'm the one who left him at the supermarket." The words hit hard. Daniel's thoughts spun. He had imagined many things, but not this. Someone willingly abandoning a puppy only to come looking for him again. "Why?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Why leave him like that? Why all the messages? Why the warning?" Elena stepped back slightly, as if the weight of everything she had carried was too heavy to hold alone. "Because I didn't know who to trust," she said. "And because I knew someone would find him. Someone kind. I hoped it would be the right person." Daniel looked down at the puppy, then back at her. Confusion, fear, and curiosity tangled inside him. "What's going on? What does this note mean?" She studied his face, then nodded. "Can I come inside?" she asked softly. "I'll explain everything." For a moment, Daniel hesitated. But something in her expression, maybe the raw honesty, maybe the exhaustion, made him step aside. She walked in quietly, her eyes instantly landing on the puppy again. He wagged his tiny tail and whined, as if recognizing her. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the puppy resting in Daniel's arms. The mysterious note lay between them like the final piece of a puzzle waiting to be placed. Elena took a deep breath. "His name is Milo," she began, her voice soft but steady. "He belonged to my brother, Leo. He rescued animals, all kinds. He cared for them more than anything. And Milo was special. Leo found him abandoned near an old warehouse. But he wasn't alone. There were others, animals that were sick or injured. My brother was investigating the people behind it. Daniel felt his chest tighten. The pieces were beginning to connect, forming a clearer picture. Elena continued. Leo got too close. When he disappeared, I knew something was wrong. I found Milo alone in his apartment, wearing that collar with a note inside. I knew he wanted someone to find it, someone who could help or at least keep Milo safe. Daniel looked down at the little puppy, suddenly seeing him not as a random rescue, but as the key to something bigger, something far more personal. I couldn't keep Milo with me, she said, voice trembling. People were watching. I didn't want them to find him, so I left him where someone kind was sure to notice, a supermarket entrance. I stayed close and watched until you picked him up. She gave a weak smile. I could tell instantly that you were the person Leo would have trusted. Daniel's throat tightened. He thought back to that moment outside the store, how lost and helpless the tiny puppy looked, how something inside him felt drawn to help. Now he understood why. I sent the messages because I needed to make sure you were safe, and that he was safe. She reached across the table, but stopped halfway. I'm sorry for scaring you, and I'm sorry for dragging you into something so heavy. But thank you. You kept him alive. Daniel stared at Milo, who now rested peacefully, unaware of the complicated world around him. He felt a wave of emotion, not fear, not confusion, but a quiet sense of purpose. What happens now? He asked. Elena wiped her eyes gently. The people who hurt those animals, they've been caught. Authorities finally acted. I got the call this afternoon. It's over. You're not in danger anymore. She looked at the note on the table. Leo's investigation helped bring them down. His work meant something. And Milo, he's the last piece of him I've left. Silence filled the kitchen for a moment, warm and heavy with meaning. Daniel took a breath. Do you want him back? He asked quietly. Elena looked at Milo for a long time before shaking her head slowly. Leo wanted him to be safe, to find a home where he'd be loved. And I can see he already found that with you. She smiled through her tears. If you want him, he's yours. The words hit Daniel with unexpected warmth. He looked down at Milo, this tiny abandoned puppy who had brought fear, mystery, and hope all in one journey. And he felt something settle inside him, a quiet certainty. I want him, he said softly. I really do. Milo wagged his tail, as if confirming the decision himself. Elena let out a breath of relief and stood slowly. Then he's yours, she whispered. And my brother, he'd be grateful. They walked to the door together. Before leaving, Elena gently kissed Milo's head. Be happy, she whispered. Then she looked at Daniel. Thank you for everything. He watched her walk into the night, her silhouette disappearing down the quiet street. When he closed the door behind her, the house felt different, warmer, brighter, as if something broken had finally started to heal. Daniel set Milo down on the carpet. The puppy stumbled playfully, then looked up at him with those trusting eyes, the same eyes that had captured him from the moment he found him outside the supermarket. You're home now, Daniel whispered. Milo barked once, a tiny cheerful sound, and Daniel laughed, really laughed, for the first time that night. The mystery was over. The danger had passed. And what started as a strange, frightening journey had become something much simpler and much more important. A beginning built on kindness, trust, and a reminder that sometimes the smallest rescues lead to the biggest changes. As Milo curled up beside him, warm and safe, Daniel understood that he hadn't just saved a puppy. The puppy had saved him too.